All right, Godfather, you ready for our big date tonight at your favorite place in the world?
I'm looking forward to it, Chad. It's going to be fun.
El Gaucho, baby, you and I, and we're going to be able to sit back, relax, and enjoy a nice meal that I think will probably help put us into a food coma, so we'll sleep nicely tonight on this Friday.
Yeah. Well, when we're eating that late, I don't know whether to go to bed right away or to stay up a little while and let that food digest a little bit.
Well, I put in a request for Ian. I have not heard back, but hopefully Ian will be there large and in charge and ready to go because he loves you. He knows both of us, and that guy's dynamite when it comes to his job. He knows what he's doing. He knows how to take care of people, Godfather. That's what it's all about.
He does. But, you know, their servers are great there. They trained them well, and Ian is terrific, and we'll be rooting to get him. That's for sure.
All right, we got a big show today. Very busy. Alex Brink, our college football and NFL insider, going to join us coming up in 20 minutes. We'll get his take on Dylan Gabriel and the fit with Oregon. We'll get his take on the latest from the Washington Supreme Court. He'll be excited about that with the Cougs and Beavs. We're going to talk with Justin Myers, who will stop by at 4:20, and we'll dive into the NFL with the one and only Brian Noe at 5:20. We got a lot of thoughts on the Chargers and their decision to fire Brandon Staley. That's long overdue. We'll have some thoughts on the Trailblazers' loss last night at home to the Utah Jazz. You want to jump on board, 503-248-0620. You can reach out to Dwight on X, at Dwight James. You'll find me there at Chad in Rib City. Also, our man, Chris Burkhardt, is here. So let's get the show rolling. And I guess we'll start with the news that just broke, Godfather. But the Washington Supreme Court denied a request by the 10 outgoing schools to review a lower court's preliminary injunction that has established Washington State and Oregon State as the only members of the board. So what that means now is that Oregon State and Washington State are in control of the Pac-12. And we've talked about this now for a few months. But for those two schools, I can't think of a better outcome in the courts for them as they proceed forward to try and figure out what the future is going to be for them and what type of conference they want to be a part of.
You know, Chad, it looks like they're going to get control of money in that war chest that the Pac-12 had. Now, you know, obviously the Pac-12 has debts too, and that'll have to be settled. And I think, too, and we have talked about this in the past, there are debts, and I think there's also something owed to those other 10 schools. I don't think you can just keep all that money because they were responsible for earning a share of that money, too. So they've got to, you know, I think come to some sort of agreement so there aren't further lawsuits, so it's somewhat amicable when you break this off and everybody walks away with a few bucks.
Yeah, even John Wilner, who's been covering this story for the Mercury News, he thinks it's highly unlikely that the two schools, Washington State and Oregon State, will tell the other 10 to pound sand. My guess is there'll be some type of an agreement that comes together. But really what this does for Oregon State and Washington State, and I think this is a critical piece, Godfather, their future right now is very uncertain because they're sitting in a conference. They only have two schools, and they don't know what their future is going to be, whether they join the Mountain West or they perform a reverse merger. If they're going to add other schools around the country, maybe they'll have schools at their disposal when the ACC potentially breaks up. Who knows what the future looks like? But in the short term, this will allow them to continue business over the next couple of years, and they can function as a two-team conference for at least 2 years before they have to make any decisions. So now they'll have the funds to be able to get business done over the next couple of years as they continue to go out and talk to the Mountain West and some of the other schools across the country to determine what type of conference they want to have. That's the big key here. They're going to be able to survive for a couple of years as they put their plans together. That's huge for them.
Well said, Chad. That absolutely sums it up. They will have an operating budget now for a couple of years to bridge the gap, I think, before some sort of conference becomes available to them, some sort of hybrid, ACC, Big West, I don't know, Big 12, whatever they call it, whatever it becomes. They'll still have the Pac-10, Pac-8, Pac-12 name to use for a new conference. And this, you know, I don't think they'll have to make major cuts in sports or coaching salaries or anything like that. They ought to be able to stay pretty true to what they are now, I think.
The statement that came out from Oregon State and Washington State, quote, "We are pleased with the Washington Supreme Court's decision today. We look forward to continuing our work, charting a path forward for the conference that is in the best interest of student athletes and our wider university communities. That came out from J. Anthony Murphy, president of Oregon State University, and Kirk Scholes, president at Washington State University. I like this thought that John Wilner put out. He said that at one point in early November, the sides were close to a mediated settlement, but per multiple sources, the defendants, the 10, not just UW, opted against. Wonder if they're regretting that now.
Yeah. No, we'd rather spend a whole lot of money on attorneys to lose not only the original case, but the appeal. So, it's the same group that turned down the deal with ESPN a year ago, where they could have all been pretty well set in their conference.
Yeah, I agree. I think the good news here, and I agree with your assessment, I don't think that there's any way, shape, or form that you're going to have a situation where I think those other schools do have rights to the money that was earned because they were part of the conference when the profits came in. But I think the majority of the funds, especially the emergency funds, that should belong to the two remaining schools. So I think they'll be able to come up with some type of, agreement in terms of what money will be shared and hopefully be able to avoid courts, because my guess is Oregon State and Washington State, they don't want to do anything harsh that would get things tied up in the courts to where they can't operate. They need freedom of movement to be able to use that funds for whatever they need as they continue to press forward into this year and next year.
Yeah, no question, Chad. It's to everyone's advantage to keep further arrangements out of the courtroom, I think. It always ends up costing more money than it's worth in most cases, and I think there's no reason that they can't come to some sort of agreement. Look, the 10 that are leaving are going to be pretty well set, and the 2 that are staying, they can prove that money's pretty necessary for them moving forward. So I do think if cooler heads prevail, if you get smart people in the room, you can make some sort of a deal that keeps everyone reasonably happy.
All right, Godfather, the other big news that went down this morning, the Chargers have fired head coach Brandon Staley and their general manager Tom Telesco after last night's 63-21 debacle in Las Vegas to the Raiders. What a mess that was. The team quit. They didn't have Justin Herbert. It was a mess, and they finally did the move that they probably should have done after that collapse against Jacksonville in the playoffs last year. But now they can press forward and start their search for a brand new GM and a brand new coach, and hopefully Justin Herbert can shed some of his recent unfortunate history of having guys like Mario Cristobal and Anthony Lynn as his head coach along with Brandon Staley, and hopefully they can find a great offensive mind to come in and get that franchise on track so Justin Herbert can go out there and really showcase what he's about, which is being elite and being great at his job.
Yeah, Chad, I mentioned to you after the playoffs last year that I thought it was time to fire the coach, and you warned me at the time. The Spanos family moves very slowly, and wow, do they move slowly. We didn't need to see that mess last night to know the guy needed to be fired. He should have been fired a long time ago. There are other games this year that showed what's going on, the mess that they're in down there, and nothing was done. But they had to go out and give up 63 points for a head coach that's a defensive-minded head coach. And that's what had to happen before they finally fired the guy. So I don't know. You don't hold a lot of hope for one of those big names out there getting hired to be the new head coach, do you?
Well, no, because this is a family, the Spanos family, that traditionally has been very cheap when it comes to paying a head coach. But, look, there's one guy that makes sense. You've got to go out there and do whatever you can to get Jim Harbaugh as your head coach. Get Harbaugh, pay him whatever he wants, bring him in, let him set up the culture, and get that franchise back on track. When you've got a quarterback like that, you can attract whatever coach you want. They've got a brand new stadium to play in, and they've got a pretty good roster that has some very workable pieces right now. I would spend big and bring in the big-time head coach who's going to do it his way with a proven track record. And if you do it that way and you hire the right coach, a guy like Jim Harbaugh, it won't take him long to get the team in contention for a championship because Justin Herbert is that good. So I don't even think that this should be a discussion. Go out there and get Jim Harbaugh. It makes too much sense, and you know he wants to come back to the NFL. But I don't trust him to do that.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Do you really think they will spend the kind of money it's going to take? What do you think it's going to take to get Jim Harbaugh to San Diego or to Los Angeles, excuse me?
Between $12 and $15 million a year.
I don't know, Chad.
That's what it's going to take. It will take between 12 and 15 million, but at least, let's say you don't want to spend big and bring in the big name like Jim Harbaugh, then go out and hire a great young offensive mind to come in and work with Justin Herbert and get that team on the right track. So if you don't want to go big, then at least go with an offensive mind. Take a look around the NFL right now. The division leaders, the teams that are in a position to do the most damage, they all have offensive head coaches at the helm. I think that's the right way to go. And their big mistake last year was, not hiring Sean Payton. And I'm thankful they didn't, because he's in Denver doing a heck of a job. They've won 6 out of the last 7 and now in a position to go to the playoffs after that wreck of a job that was done last year by Nathaniel Hackett. They had a chance to hire Payton. You trying to tell me that Peyton would not have that team in a position to win a championship right now if he had Justin Herbert as his quarterback? But sometimes in life you get what you pay for. They went cheap. They didn't want to fire a guy and still pay him not to be head coach. They should have gone out and made the move to get Sean Payton, and that's on them. And in life, you know this, Godfather, sometimes you do get what you pay for. And for Brandon Staley, he's a good mind and a smart football guy, but obviously not a good head coach. And for bad head coaches or people that are leading a company, the longer they're in position, the more of the cracks that you start to see in the regime. And that's what happened with Staley. And my guess is they probably regret keeping him now going into this year after what happened in the playoffs last year.
Chad, one more question about this, too. They fired the general manager, too, which seems like the right thing to do. He hasn't had great success hiring head coaches. But don't you think they should hire a GM before they hire the coach? Unless, of course, they go out and get a guy like Harbaugh. Then you let him hire the general manager who would basically work for him, I assume.
Yeah, I think the best way to do it in most cases, and you've been around sports for a long time, you probably want to hire the general manager first so that you can have him go out and find the head coach that he wants to work with. And the reason why is the synergy. You want your GM to have a relationship with the head coach that he hires so that they're on the same page. And usually those are guys that have a good relationship, a good connection, because, that work, that synergy that exists in organizations that are well run between GM and coach is critical. So, yes, Denver did it. They already had George Payton in place. They hired Sean Payton. That's fine because of Payton's experience. If you hire Jim Harbaugh and then you get a general manager, that's fine because Harbaugh can help you pick the guy he wants to work with. But in most cases, get your GM, let him be a part of the hiring process to find his coach so that you can make sure you have that synergy in the front office, which is critical.
Well, it's, I think, critical to the development of Justin Herbert that he finally get a coach who understands offense and can make maximum use of his talents.
Yeah, that's what it's all about. This is not rocket science, man. When you have Justin Herbert, the biggest problem in football is finding the right guy at quarterback. They've got that guy. He's a franchise quarterback, a delicious quarterback that's capable of doing anything on a football field, and I'm just tired of watching him flounder around because he's surrounded by incompetence. So I put that on the Chargers, not on Justin Herbert. I do think Justin Herbert's as good as anybody else in the league, and once he gets the right coach and the right setup, I think he'll showcase that.
Let's hope.
I'm passionate about this, Godfather. I love Justin Herbert. I don't want to see him surrounded by idiots.
Yeah.
Morons.
Again.
Come on, man. Why get into this game if you don't want to spend money?
He's been surrounded by idiots most of his career.
Gosh. I mean, think about that transition. He went Cristobal. Think about this for a second. Cristobal and Arroyo to Anthony Lynn to Brandon Staley. That's a rough transition right there.
Yeah.
And he's still alive.
It's a miracle, too, the way he's been beaten up the last 2 years. He can't take another season like the ones he's had the last 2 years. He'll be a cripple.
All right, we'll come back, and when we do, we're going to be joined by our college football and NFL insider, Alex Brink from E4 Sports, former Coug. We'll get his take on the decision from the Washington Supreme Court. What about that fit between Dillon Gabriel and Oregon? We'll ask him about guys lining up offsides on offense. That's Dwight. I'm Chad. Justin Myers will join us at 4:20, and Brian Noe talking football at 5:20 here on the Rip City Drive. All right, Rip City Drive with Dwight and Chad. Very happy to welcome to the show our college football and NFL insider, Alex Brink, former Coug. And Alex, we'll start with this. How about Washington Supreme Court denies review, which means Oregon State and Washington State are now in control of the Pac-12?
Show me the money, Chad and Dwight. That's what I say. You know, as a Coug, and for the Beavers, I mean, that's obviously quite the ruling. It's, in line, obviously, with what the Whitman County judge had in mind. And, frankly, and again, everybody's got an opinion on this. I think it's correct. I mean, Washington State and Oregon State are the last two remaining members of the PAC. They should be responsible for making the decisions based on the PAC. That entity has not gone away, and 10 schools have decided they don't want to be a part of it, and they've made that very clear, and they shouldn't have any control about the current status or the future of the league, in my opinion.
So, Alex, that means money, right? Doesn't that mean they are in control of this money that the conference supposedly has?
Yeah, 100%. And, that cuts both ways, right? Because it's money, it's assets and liabilities. And there's been talked about, there's liabilities on the books. So it's not like Washington State and Oregon State are going to be like, Scrooge McDuck and just diving into gold coins. I mean, there's some things to sort out. But in the end, the two remaining entities in the PAC have the ability to carve out their own future with what funds are remaining. And if you really think about this from a financial perspective, teams like Oregon and Washington are getting half shares to go to the Big Ten, a little over $30 million. Same thing for the teams going to the Big 12. They're getting a bigger share, but it's still only about $32 million. So Washington State and Oregon State, if they can come into some money that is at or around that number per year, then you're in a really good spot. And so I think now the key is the representatives for those schools need to get into the financials and figure out what the actual numbers are so they can solidify their future moving forward. And if it's what I think it is, Washington State and Oregon State are going to be in a fantastic setup moving forward over the next 2 years, because it looks like the ACC will probably blow up in the next year or two, if not sooner. And then you're going to have a whole lot of schools looking for places to play and an opportunity, if you have money in the bank, to dictate your own future.
We'll talk with Alex Brink, and we'll get back to college football in just a moment, but we have other big news that took place this morning. The Chargers have fired Brandon Staley, their head coach. They moved out their general manager, Tom Telesco. Not necessarily a specific name, but what type of coach would you like to see the Chargers hire for Justin Herbert?
Well, it starts with an offensive-minded head coach, right? I mean, I think that's the rub. Anytime you have a defensive-minded head coach like Staley, there's always some friction in the building when it comes to offensive football and decision-making. And so you want an offensive coach that is going to really utilize Herbert's talents, get him in the right position, and make sure that he meshes with the personnel on that roster. Now, they have some things to address, right? I mean, they have a lot of talent, but a lot of aging talent. And so the Chargers got to figure out how they remake that roster around Justin Herbert. I would like to see it done with an offensive head coach.
Okay, I want to switch gears a little bit and get back to college stuff. Alex, there was a court ruling a couple of days ago in West Virginia about allowing multiple transfers of players without penalty. And it's good right now for just the next 2 weeks, but they're trying to get it extended, obviously, forever, I guess. What do you think the impact that would be on colleges who would probably have to negotiate, so to speak, every year with some of these players who are transferring in who might be able to just turn around and transfer out again?
That would be a disaster. I mean, I think the reality is, if that ends up being the case, if that ruling holds past the 14 days, then you have to institute some version of free agency within college football. I mean, it just is what it is. You have to have contracts. You have to do all those things because, to your point, you'd be negotiating every year with players trying to leave, and I think it would be really, really bad for the sport. Let's just call it what it is, right? College football, major college football, is moving towards an NFL model and moving towards pro sports. Well, then make it pro sports, right? That's what it needs to be. It needs to have the checks and balances that come with being a professional league, because right now you don't have that. You're kind of lucky that you had the one-time transfer rule with a few exceptions, because it kept some of that tamped down. But if you go to this kind of free-for-all every year, transfer as many times as you want, that's going to be a real problem, even bigger problem than what you have with the portal and NIL as it stands today.
Hey, Alex, what's your take on the fit between Oregon and Dillon Gabriel?
I think it's fantastic. I think Dillon Gabriel is a talented player. I think he'll fit into Will Stein's system really well. I mean, it's similar things to what he's done. And there's no doubt that Oregon's talent, both offensively and defensively, is going to allow a quarterback to come in and find success. I mean, look, they run the football first, and they do it really well, and then they play action pass and utilize the quarterback's legs. I mean, those are all strengths for Dylan Gabriel, and I think it'll be a great opportunity for him, to potentially go win a Heisman and, see if the Ducks can finally get into the national championship conversation.
Alex, we haven't heard anything yet about Cam Ward and where he might end up, and I'm curious if you have any hints on that and where he would best fit given the schools that still have openings for quarterbacks.
Sure. I don't have any specific information on it, and some of the names that have been thrown out are obviously very high profile. When you talk about the likes of Ohio State, Miami's been thrown around, Texas A&M at times. UW maybe. I don't think they've settled their situation yet, so which would obviously be heartbreaking. But there's a lot of opportunities. I think in the end for Cam Ward, he needs to take. I mean, I would love for him to go to Ohio State. I think that would be so cool, right? Like his story going from the FCS level to Washington State and find success, and then you end up at Ohio State and you get a year to go. Again, a year to go win a Heisman or national title would be really special. So I think he needs to take the best opportunity on the table. But he needs to go to a place where he understands the system he's getting into, and it doesn't deviate too much from what he's already done.
We're talking with Alex Brink from E4 Sports, former Coug here on the Rip City Drive. Who's going to play quarterback for Washington State next year?
It's a great question. I know Ty Thompson from Oregon was on campus. I think it was reported in the last couple days. So he's an option, I guess, in the portal, so to speak. There's other players out there. There's a lot. I mean, look, the portal's a market, right? I mean, there's a lot in the market that needs to shake out probably before Washington State gets to pick their guy, because they're not going to be able to pay a guy in the portal a significant amount. So, there'll be options in the portal, but John Mateer, who is the backup to Cam Ward, has really shown some promise. I like what I see from Mateer. I would be surprised if Mateer is not the day one starter next year.
Okay, I can't wait to ask you this question because I'm wondering if you have any insight on it. But that play in the Chiefs and Bills game last week where Kadarius Toney was, offsides, it's pretty much documented on video. He was offsides. Have you seen that? I mean, is it customary for wide receivers to be offside like that without penalty? What's your take?
Boy, I'm glad you asked me that question, Brad. I'm sitting next to my good friend Justin Hoover, who's from Kansas City and actually a Chiefs fan, and I think he will, hate to hear this, but I mean, ultimately, it's the job of the receiver to make sure that he's at or behind the line of scrimmage wherever he needs to be. And I would imagine that if you went back and watched tape, yes, receivers are lined up occasionally offsides, very similar to that situation. The problem for Toney is that he was so close to the line of scrimmage. It was so clear that his helmet was across the center, across the tackle in the center, that was the difference, right? It was an easy call from that standpoint. There are times where a receiver's farther away from where the ball's at, and they might be offside, and they may not get called for it because of, it doesn't look maybe like he's totally offside to where the ref's standing, but I think that's really what got him. I mean, it definitely happens. I think, obviously, the heartbreak is that for Chiefs fans, it was such a monumental play, well executed by all rights in such a crucial moment, and then have it called back, have the refs make the decision. That never feels good to anybody.
Hey, Alex, Patrick Mahomes, is he still the exact same guy? Is he just a victim of a young offense with young receivers, or is there anything else that you see that might be limiting his production?
I think Mahomes is fantastic. He's exactly the guy that's won Super Bowls and MVPs. This happens in the career of NFL quarterbacks as rosters turn over and guys take bigger opportunities. I mean, think about the roster he stepped onto, into the locker room at first with when you have Tyreek Hill, when you have Travis Kelce, when you have great backs, and, you have all these guys, and then they all kind of obviously matriculate to other places, and you got to replace that. It can be hard at times. There's growing pains at those skill positions, and so I have confidence Andy Reid will get kind of that group back, but I think Mahomes is the same guy. The problem is for a quarterback, when you don't maybe have the talent around you, you start trying to do a little too much, and that's where you can make some plays that maybe are out of character because you're trying to make the big play or get the first down that normally somebody else could help you with, right?
Curious your take on the Cowboys and Dak Prescott. Obviously, the perception of him is changing radically this year with Malarkey's offense and seemingly his ability now to adjust to it and fit pretty well with it. What do you think of Dak now?
Well, I think the system fits Dak really well. I think it takes him back to, some of the things that he did really well in college. I think he's also got even more depth at the playmaking positions. I mean, CeeDee Lamb is really growing into an elite wide receiver. You add Brandon Cooks, who's always productive, and Ferguson at tight end has really become a really good player. So I think you have better players as well as a better fit in the system for Dak, and he's just clearly playing within himself. And then, to be honest, when you have elite elite defense, and you can run the football pretty effectively, that's really what makes quarterbacks great in the NFL, right? And that's just the reality of it. And so I think Dak has those things, and so you see that all come together along with his maturity and some of the new pieces.
Hey, Alex, what's your take on the term game manager? It seems to be used as kind of a slight towards quarterbacks, but how do you view that term? You played the position.
Yeah, and I don't really buy it. I mean, playing quarterback is about managing situations, right? That's part of the deal. If you talk about, say, Brock Purdy or whatever, he's executing plays and he's executing these things that he has to do in those situations, and those situations happen in seconds, in milliseconds, right? So you talk about a game manager, that's a guy making decisions at an incredibly high level in incredibly pressure-packed situations. And, frankly, it's usually just used to describe somebody that's physically not quite as gifted, right, as somebody else. But I would say that if somebody is a successful quarterback at a high level, NFL, college, whatever, they better be a good game manager because that's just part of playing the position.
I want to get your take real quick on the schedule that the Cougars have coming up next season. It's a weird schedule, and I know you kind of have to take potluck putting a schedule together on the fly. 5 straight road games right in the middle of the season, home games before that, home games after that. Are people going to be buying tickets to see the likes of Fresno State, New Mexico, Hawaii? How is that going to play in Pullman? Do you think they'll be okay at the turnstiles?
I think no matter what, particularly with Washington State, but just in general, if you're winning football games, you create excitement, right? Doesn't matter, relatively, it doesn't matter who you're playing, And I think there's some really good football teams on that schedule when you talk about Fresno State and Boise State and, Texas Tech and Washington and Oregon State, right? So if Washington State's winning football games, that means they're a pretty good football team, and people want to see that, right? And it creates excitement. If you're not winning games, Pullman, frankly, is a hard place to get to, and people aren't nearly as motivated to get there. And so, to me, it hinges on Washington State obviously winning games. That sounds very simplistic, but that's just the reality of it. And it's been like that even when they're in the Pac, right? There's Pac home games at times in Pullman that are not well attended simply because Washington State's not in the race, in the Pac race, or they've lost some games. So I think that's the focus. I think the schedule will be fine. I think it also offers a lot of opportunity for Washington State to win. And I think the only downside that they didn't really control is that because they already had non-league games scheduled, and 2 of them happened to be Mountain West schools, they're playing more Mountain West games than you probably would want to, right? You're playing 8 Mountain West games. You'd much rather have another Power 5 team on that schedule like Oregon State does, but that's just kind of the way things broke.
All right, Alex, E4 Sports, tell me about the Yard Baseball Academy. I've seen the facility. It's awesome. What do you guys got going on?
Yeah, we got some fantastic things for baseball and softball athletes this off-season at the Yard Baseball Academy, both our west side facility in Beaverton and our east side facility over in Milwaukee, which has a brand-new cage in our 11,000-square-foot facility, a lot of space to do hitting, fielding, pitching. You can even take fly balls in there with high ceilings, so it's a great place. If you have a son or daughter looking to improve their skills in the off-season, check out the yardbba.com.
All right, buddy. Have a good time down in California. Dwight and I appreciate it.
Thanks, guys. Take care.
Oregon Father, you could hear it in his voice, man. He was happy to know that Oregon State and Washington State are now in control of the Pac-12.
Yeah, one thing I picked up from that discussion, Chad, was I think he's absolutely right. If you win, it sometimes doesn't really matter who you're beating. Fans are going to buy the ticket. They're going to come in and see a winner. Everybody wants to see it. I go all the way back to Portland State. They were Division II, drawing 20,000 people to that stadium downtown for playoff games and for big games against rivals like Texas A&I. Okay, all of a sudden, the athletic director at the time decided, we're going to move up to Big Sky. We're going to go do that. Okay, well, the problem is ever since you've moved up to Big Sky, you've been able to compete somewhat, but you're not a big winner. You're not winning the conference championship. You're not even a threat to do that. I think in retrospect, winning at a lower level is probably better than being mediocre at the next level up. And I think Washington State, with that schedule, they've got a chance to have a pretty good record next year.
Well, Chris and I were going through the Oregon State Beavers schedule last night, and if you're Trent Bray, you've got a chance with the schedule they have in front of them to go out there and have a winning season. And you can make a name for yourself with the work that you're doing on a program that has hit hard times with conference realignment and the fact that Jonathan Smith took off. But the schedule shapes up nicely where you can grab some wins and have a feel-good season potentially based on, the situation they're in. It's not a bad scenario.
Yeah, I think it's going to work. They'll have 2 years where they're basically, even though they're the Pac-2, they're going to be playing as independents. They're going to be scrapping around for games. And they still have a chance to put together a really good record. And I believe the boosters of those two schools, the alums, they're going to support that as long as you're winning. If you start losing big, then it's going to be a lot more difficult. But it's that way in all sports, all places. Whether you're the Trailblazers or whomever, if you're not winning, they don't want to come so much.
Winning solves a lot of issues in sports, no question about it. The big news, or the big question moving forward is, what type of conference will they have? And then once they form that conference, what type of TV deal can they secure with guaranteed revenue? My guess is it will come in well below the $30 million that was offered up by ESPN, but at least with this decision by the courts, it gives the two schools a chance to survive over the next couple of years until they have a specific plan in place in terms of what they want to do moving forward. And by the way, I would tell you, I was at the station last night until late along with Chris Burkhardt because of the late Blazer game in fifth quarter. Mm-hmm. If you're ever in a dark building that's quiet late at night with Chris Burkhardt, don't get into conversation with him because he'll lead you down a depressing path, and then you're going to go home and have to rethink your entire life. We, for some reason, stumbled onto parenting, the cost of children, home mortgages, and bills, and how living right now is very difficult. And so I left, and I was like, he's right, man. It's brutal out there right now.
Chris, did you do that to poor Chad?
I blew his mind, I think. And, it was a fun little conversation.
Were you just
My respect for Burkhardt has risen significantly over the last 12 hours.
I think he might have just subtly been working you for a raise, maybe. Maybe that was it.
I know what I'm doing.
I don't think so. He knows what he's doing. He's always got an angle on something.
Yeah.
All right. We got Justin Myers. He's going to join us coming up at 4:20, so we'll talk ball with Justin Myers. We got to get his take on Dylan Gabriel now with the Oregon Ducks. And then Brian Noe going to talk NFL. Some big matchups, including Dallas and Buffalo this weekend. NFL tripleheader tomorrow on NFL Network. That starts with the Vikings and Bengals, and it ends at 5:15 in the evening with the Broncos and Lions. So a lot of good football games this weekend. If you want to jump on board, 503-248-0620. When we come back, the good news continues to roll in today for the Oregon State Beavers. We'll give you the latest. Hey, Godfather, how does that work if you have credit card debt and then you die? Does it get passed on to your spouse or your family? How does that work? Oh, my goodness. Life, Godfather. Credit cards are so much fun, though.
I'll tell you what, anything that just allows you to walk up and buy whatever you want to buy is pretty cool until you have to pay for it.
Well, the good news doesn't stop with the Washington State Supreme Court today. Oregon State continues to get good news. What's the latest, Godfather?
Well, this is from Oregon State Athletic Director Scott Barnes. Quote, due to the district attorney's decision not to file charges for DUII or similar offenses against Damian Martinez, he will be allowed to participate in the upcoming bowl game. Now, that's still going to be a real tough bowl game, but Damian Martinez is an all-American running back, basically. So that makes the game much more watchable, at least, and gives them a better chance to win the game for sure.
Says here on November 29th, Corvallis police stopped Martinez for running a red light and accused him of DUII, reckless driving and reckless endangering. Martinez also was cited for possession of marijuana as a minor, since he's under 21. He acknowledged the arrest in a post on X, writing that he made a mistake. So that means he's going to play. I'll tell you what, man, the decision to go to the Sun Bowl is getting better by the moment. Found out that Notre Dame gets to go to the Sun Bowl based on a draw. It sells out instantly, and now Martinez is going to play. And I noticed where the point spread has dropped down to 6.5. Notre Dame is favored by 6.5 in that game, and it looks like Sam Hartman has opted out of the game, so sophomore Steve Angeli is going to get a chance to start for the Irish.
That changes the outlook of that game for sure.
Yeah, there's no question. And now, all of a sudden, you take a bowl game. I don't care who's playing for you. You got a lot of younger guys who are going to get a chance to step up. But I would imagine for the Beavs, knowing they've got an opportunity in front of a sellout to take on the most storied school in college football history, that should provide enough motivation for the Beavs and their coaching staff to go down there and get ready for a football game. And that should make for good football right there.
Yeah, I think so. And Oregon State's going to have some kids out on the field that are trying to show they belong there, that they can step in next season and take a position that someone else occupied this year. So I think it's good, and they've got pretty good history with Notre Dame, so you never know.
Well, the most important thing in all of this is that once I get confirmation on the press passes, I will be taking the tickets that I purchased for $60 a piece and returning those to the open market, hoping to find a Catholic-loving Notre Dame fan who wants to go and cheer on the Irish at the Sun Bowl, and then I will sell them the tickets appropriately. That's how that's going to go.
And I know you got great seats. What are the good seats going for down there right now? Do you have any idea?
Yeah, roughly somewhere between $300 to $400 per ticket.
That's better than 60. Nice going.
That was my thought.
Yeah.
Yeah. I ran the scenario past my boy Steve. He thought about it for about 10 seconds. He goes, well, that is interesting. I thought that was pretty good.
Yeah, sitting in the press box might be a little nicer, too. You never know about the weather down there, but that's cool.
I know it's just one game, but would a win for Oregon State against Notre Dame, would that help them at all as they get ready to head into the offseason of uncertainty, or does it not matter?
You know what, Chad, my deal is it doesn't matter to anybody but them, and it will matter to them. They were there, they played the game, they won the game. Everybody kind of thinks of bowl games, especially nowadays, as sort of inconsequential. But to the guys who played in it and the guys who won it and the coaching staff, that would be a very meaningful win for them, I believe, and a nice springboard into next season.
Well, I came across this report from ESPN in regards to the Washington Supreme Court and their decision today giving Oregon State and Washington State control of the conference. This report here from ESPN says the ruling allows OSU and WSU full discretion to operate the conference as they see fit, Godfather, pertinently as it comes to revenue distributions. Last week, OSU and WSU voted to block a mid-year conference-wide revenue payment, which they said was to protect the conference against pending liabilities. That's a big deal.
Yeah, and the original ruling that came out of the first court case, and Wilner kind of re-emphasized this, was that they need to come to some sort of a amicable settlement with the 10 teams in order to keep the thing from going back into court again. That's a condition of the initial ruling, and I think they'll have the common sense to do something that doesn't get them into trouble.
You know what I want to have happen here? I hope it turns into a melee like we saw with Indiana in Milwaukee with Giannis running around looking for his game ball.
Yeah.
It would be great if Scott Barnes and like Mr. Scholes from WSU came out and said, yeah, you guys can suck it, man. You wanted to leave so bad. You ain't getting a freaking dime from us. Like, it would be great if this thing spilled into the public and those guys started taunting and talking trash to the other 10. That would be fun. Yeah, you wanted to leave so bad, suck it. We're not giving you a dime. Woo!
Yeah.
You can make it a WWE style event, man.
Yeah, well, you better watch out because some of those other schools that are still left probably have more money in the coffers to take you as far in court as they want to take you. You know.
Well, that is definitely true. But I just think it's funny that in a world, it's nice occasionally to see the little guy get a W, Godfather, because the funny thing in all of this is that Washington State and Oregon State now have control of the conference, and they can make financial decisions when the reality is Washington State and Oregon State did probably less to contribute to the coffers that every other school did, which I think is funny.
Yeah, you could make that case for the two Bay Area schools, too. You know, that they haven't done much recently to help out either.
I don't know really what to make of Cal and Stanford because they're, you know, when it comes to football and basketball, they have not been great, but they also, I have to respect them for what they bring to the table academic-wise. They bring the smarts.
Oh, who cares?
You don't care about that?
Well, I think most sports fans would say, so what? Who cares? Yeah, they're not too worried about that part of it. It doesn't even seem like they're college players anymore. It seems like they're pros.
Is the Sun Bowl the worst bowl you've been to? What other bowl games have you covered?
I covered the Poulon Weed Eater Bowl, which is
where was that? Like in Shreveport, Louisiana? Where was it?
Louisiana, yes. That was the former, I think, Independence Bowl. And it was just about as bad as the name indicates. But spending the week in Shreveport was the worst part of the whole thing. Game wasn't so bad. It was the week spent in Shreveport.
Well, I would imagine you can get some good fried food in Shreveport.
Everything is fried in Shreveport, I think. But we actually, what we ended up doing is we went to see Centenary play. The Centenary.
Where Robert Parrish went.
Yes. And so we went just to see him because we had nothing else to do. Their nickname, by the way, is the Gentleman, Centenary Gentleman. And they did not have any Robert Parrishes playing for them on that night. But we went.
Centenary Gentleman? So that's their mascot's a gentleman?
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I just knew that Robert Parrish went to Centenary because when I started watching the NBA Finals, Lawrence Tanter, the great PA announcer for the Lakers, would announce the players, and he'd always say, and from Centenary, 00, Robert Parrish. And I always thought that was cool. Yeah. That's the only time I had ever heard of Centenary in my lifetime.
Yeah, Tanner was great. The best thing is he would introduce everything before the game started, but the last tagline was always, and ladies and gentlemen, please, no smoking. Okay, got it.
Can you imagine sitting in an arena and having someone light up a heater right next to you? That's wild.
Chad, in the old days, go back and watch some old boxing video on YouTube. There's always this giant cloud of smoke from the cigars from those boxing fans watching boxing. They used to smoke in arenas. They seriously did. You know.
That's awesome. That's actually, I wouldn't mind doing that, being able to sit in an arena and just have a smoke once, just like I want to sit in a dugout with your boy. I think that's funny.
Yeah.
All right, when we come back, we'll talk about the Blazers last night. Scoot Henderson is making progress, and then Justin Meyer is going to join us at 4:20. That's Dwight. I'm Chad. You've got the Rip City Drive.
I love it. You always have.
In this sprawling metropolis have frequently been portrayed as blasé and even laid back, if you will. But one team has turned this all around. It is the pro basketball team that plays.
All right, Godfather, take a listen to this. My favorite PA announcer of all time, Lawrence Tanter, before Game 1 of the 1987 NBA Finals.
Also at guard in his 11th season from Pepperdine, number 3, Dennis Johnson. At center in his 11th season from Centenary, 00, Robert Parrish.
There you go. Lawrence Tanter announcing Robert Parrish, 00 from Centenary. And sure enough, I looked it up. It is the Gents. They are the gentlemen. I had no idea until you told me that.
Yeah, I don't know why I remember it, but it started me thinking back, and I believe their mascot is a guy in a costume that has a top hat. And he kind of, my son was with me on the trip, and he said, "Look, Dad, Mr. Peanut is here." But and the hat all kind of looked, I think he might have even had the old walking stick, you know? But, yeah, that was a guy that looked strangely like Mr. Peanut. But
that's pretty funny. The Godfather is here. Chad Doing is here. Justin Myers is going to stop by in 20 minutes. Chris Burkhardt is here. Hope you're enjoying your Friday afternoon. Beautiful weather here in the Northwest with the sunshine. I'm not hating any of that.
Yeah.
All right, let's talk about the Blazers last night. They got thumped pretty good by the Utah Jazz, who led by as much as 33. They put in their scrubs in the fourth quarter, and the Blazers were able to make the score more respectable. We'll talk about the game in just a moment, but I want to ask you about the young players because we saw progress from Tamani Kamara, who had a career-high 18 points on 7 of 10 shooting. Another career high for Scoot Henderson, 19 in his previous game, 23 points and 10 assists last night, and continued effective play from Jabari Walker. I like what I'm seeing from the youngsters, but last night, Godfather, we saw another step forward for Scoot Henderson where he was able to get the assists and get his buckets to fall. But more importantly, he looked more confident and comfortable off the bounce when he was attacking the rim.
You know, Chad, last night, well, I think, to be fair, the last two games, I watch him and I think, you know what? He's coming now. He's getting it. You know, he's figuring it out. Slowly but surely, he's kind of learning his way and his path and how to be on the court. And I think this would have happened sooner had he not been injured, but it is happening now. And you can see that, not in the number of points or assists, because really, he'll get those assists on the night where his teammates are making shots. But unfortunately for a guy looking for assists, he's playing with a lot of guys who don't make a lot of shots. So that affects his assist totals. The guy has to make the shot when you throw him the ball and he's open. So anyway, what I'm seeing is more confidence with the ball and getting to the basket, which I think is going to be his stock and trade at some point in this league. It kind of like a young Derrick Rose was, where he could get to the basket and finish with his athleticism. Scoot is athletic as hell. He gets in and dunks on people. He can finish with either hand. He's very clever. He's smart. And I go back to what Antonio Harvey always told me about little guys. Little guys adjust to the NBA a little quicker than the big guys because they've always been little guys. So they know, you know, how they've played against bigger guys on the playground when they were 10 years old. So they know they have that clever ability to get shots away. I think Scoot has that. He just has to recognize where he is and what he's doing. He threw somebody a great change of pace dribble last night on his way to the basket. It was perfect. Now, as far as Kamara is concerned, him making shots, that's news. That's a big deal because that's the piece for him that you have to have, I think. You know, he could be that 3-and-D guy for you. And we know he can defend. He's aggressive, and he likes it. That's a big part of playing defense. He likes it. The other thing is, though, he hasn't shown the ability to hit a lot of shots, but it seems to be getting better because he's trusting himself and the team is trusting him. Those are the two guys I think I saw the most improvement from last night, Chad. But it was significant. Even though they got blown out of the game, the final score wasn't indicative.
No question. I'm pretty well convinced now that Tamani Kamara can be a long-term, role player and viable in the league because he plays defense, and as you mentioned, he loves playing defense, which few guys do. But if he starts making shots like we saw last night, that suddenly takes him to a different level of where he could become a bona fide starter and a key cog in a potential title contender with the way he plays defense, and he could knock down the three. That's the type of player every team is looking for now in the NBA. I love his attitude and his approach. Now, in regards to Scoot, I really paid attention to his comments and his demeanor and the way he carried himself, through the early season struggles and the injury, being out with the bone bruise, and now that I have a chance to see him back. What I like about him, Godfather, is that he never gets too low and he doesn't get too high. I'm seeing a guy that clearly understands that he's a rookie and it's not his team yet, so he does a good job of the way he conducts himself, but he listens to his coaches, he listens to the veteran teammates. He's putting in the time, obviously, on the practice court, but he works hard in practice, and he does a good job, according to the people on the team, of film study and working with the coaches. So I see that demeanor and that work ethic, and when you combine that with the athleticism that you were talking about, I really am blown away by how poised he is for a youngster, and that gives me hope that as he continues to move forward, that obviously there's going to be peaks and valleys, but he's got the right attitude and approach to be able to manage that and deal with it, because it's not a steady climb upward for most guys. You're going to have, periods when you're 19 and you're a rookie in the NBA where you're going to, you're going to hit the wall, or you're going to have your struggles, or you're going to, have some difficulty adjusting to the game. But when you have that type of pedigree and that mindset, I like him, man. I like the way he's made and the way he conducts himself. It's impressive for a young guy.
Yeah, I would agree with that, Chad. And I've said this before, but people have to understand, too, this is a different kind of point guard, more of a playmaker. And he's not going to be the guy that goes out and gets you 40 points like Dame did. He's not that guy. But he's the guy that's going to go out and get his teammates a lot of easy shots, I think. He's getting to the basket now. And he's very good at dropping the ball off to open players. So as the players around him improve, you'll see him improve with even more assists, because he knows how to do that. He can do that. That's his skill. That's really what he was born to do. And we're not seeing enough of it yet, I think, because they're not quite of the skill level, and they're not quite as organized as they need to be for him to find them when he gets to the basket. But I like what I see, and I think the future is bright. I for a while there, I think there are a lot of people doubting him, but I think when you watch him now, when you see what he does and what he's capable of, the doubts should disappear pretty soon. He's showing the kind of promise that we wanted to see from him.
All right, Dwight, what did you see in the game last night? The Blazers did not get off to a good start. They lacked the intensity and the effort that we've seen over the last several weeks as they've been playing games. They struggled last night. What jumped out at you?
Well, it's the first time they've been favored in a game all season, if you can believe that. and I think that in itself is an adjustment for this team. It's a game they're expected to win. Utah's playing without 3 or 4 starters. So everybody goes in thinking, well, we got this. Well, they didn't got this, and I give Utah a lot of credit. Hardy is a really good young coach, and he threw a box and one. I think once I even saw a diamond in one, a 1-2-2 zone, a 3-2 zone. He threw all this stuff at him, and it really made it difficult for the Blazers. And I know Chauncey mentioned after the game, they knew they were going to see the box and one because Utah had used it the night before against the Knicks. So they practiced on it. They walked through it in the morning of the game. They still weren't ready for it. And that's one of those defenses, Chad. If you really have time to practice for it, you can shred it if you have the right shooters on the floor. But they just weren't prepared. And I see this in the NBA a lot. They don't attack zones as well as some really good high school teams do, because high schools see zones almost every game. That's what a lot of high schools play. They don't have the talent to play man-to-man, so they play zone. And the pro teams are really not good at overloads and mismatches and rotations to get open shooters the ball.
Well, I'm not concerned about what took place last night at all, and here's the reason why. If you look at their schedule, they've played 23 games on the year. They're 6-17. There's only 3 games on the schedule where they've gotten thumped and were really not competitive. Outside of that, they've put themselves in a position to contend against some of the better teams in the NBA. They haven't gotten over the hump in the fourth quarter, but they've they've been right there, which is a good sign. The team is playing really hard for Coach Phillips. The defensive improvement has been significant. They were number 11 in defensive rating going into the game last night, so I think you've got to acknowledge that the guys are defending and they're willingly getting after it on that end of the floor. And I think also I've been impressed with the way they've been able to perform with so many different guys nicked up with injuries, guys in and out of the lineup. They're using a different combination of guys, and they're playing a lot of youngsters. So overall, I like the progression. Most importantly, I like the growth of Shaden Sharp, Scoot Henderson, Tamani Kamara, and Jabari Walker. So I would expect, and they've had a real crazy schedule in terms of travel. So I would expect better energy and effort in the two games coming up on Saturday and Sunday. But overall, I'm sure that's not the type of performance Coach Phillips wants, but I'm not too concerned. I did appreciate the fact that he pulled all the starters out of the game last night and set them to send a message that the effort that they were giving out there on the floor last night was not the type of game he expects from them. And I think it's cool when you see the coach willing to sit his guys down and say, look, you're not going to go out there and give me the effort I want. I'll put the young guys in there. And they responded in the fourth quarter and made the score more respectable.
Yeah, for sure, Chad. And I think he was right to do that. And I think he really admitted after the game he was not really impressed with what his starters gave him in the first quarter. But again, you mentioned they've had guys out. Well, last night, two of those guys returned to the lineup. And you think, well, they'll be better. It doesn't work that way in the NBA. More times than not, they're worse because it disrupts the sort of rotations and guys playing together that they've been doing for the last couple weeks. So all of a sudden, people have different roles. There's a different rotation. You're playing different minutes with different guys. It does matter. So I would expect to see better of them over the weekend as these veterans return to the lineup and give them what they can give them, Brogdon and Ayton mainly.
And don't you think maybe, too, when you have a team you're trying to mold, especially with a lot of young players, that, getting your butt kicked like that, it's not necessarily a bad thing because the coach can really get their attention.
Yeah.
That's kind of the way I read it. Is that true?
Oh,
or
yeah.
Am I off base there?
No, I think you're right. You can learn a lot from games like that, and it gives you a lot of video to take into a team meeting today, for example. And, they might not even be practicing today, but I guarantee you they're looking at video of that mess last night. And here's what we did wrong. Here's what we should be doing. All those lessons, you can learn those. And I think he has attentive players who are listening, which I think is a change from what we've seen in the past. So I think part of that, too, Chad, is they have young players who some of these guys know they're going to be here. They're not young players who are just up from the G League and they're trying to impress another team to pick them up. There are guys who know they have a future here, so they better get along, they better learn, they better do all the right things because they're trying to build on this season for their future.
You're right. First time they were favored. What was that line you used? They didn't got this. I think my record in life is like 0 for 999. Anytime I've ever uttered the phrase, I got this, that's usually denotes I'm about to have massive failure. That's how that works for me.
I think men in general, every time they think we got this, they don't got this. That's the way we are. We're just,
I got this, man.
Yeah, we go over the edge. We're too arrogant about things like that. It's the way we are.
Yeah. Well, speaking of arrogance, we're going to talk with Justin Myers coming up next. We need to find out. I want to find out, and so does the Godfather, what type of ridiculous costume parties does he and the wife have planned for Christmas? Also, for a guy that hates the new college football with the transfer portal and NIL, his team sure is a benefactor of that with Dylan Gabriel coming over to the Ducks. So we'll talk with Justin Myers next. Don't forget Brian Noe. Bruno! He's going to join us coming up at 5:20 here on the Rip City Drive. All right, our next guest is a beautiful man. He is a host of Rip City Mornings on this station, Justin Myers, who is back. Now, Justin, take a listen to this list here. Mark Helfrich, Willie Taggart, Mario Cristobal, Anthony Lynn, and Brandon Staley. Who do you want the Chargers to go out and hire to make sure that Justin Herbert can get his career on the right track?
I mean, anybody that has some offensive firepower. I mean, above that list, as crazy as it sounds, the most beneficial coach for Justin Herbert was Mark Helfrich, right? I mean, you look at the numbers that Justin Herbert put up his freshman year. The only thing that Mark Helfrich kind of really screwed up on was not starting him day one, his true freshman year. I think that's one of the biggest butterfly effects, like what ifs in Oregon football that people don't talk about is what if Mark Helfrich, knowing that Justin Herbert was going to be that guy, started him from his true freshman first game.
Justin, I know you've seen the story about that court ruling, which, at least for the next 2 weeks, allows players to make a second transfer. They're trying to make that a long-term rule. What would you think of that for college football?
Well, I got a couple of, and Chris, if you can, I got an echo in my ear, so if we could get that taken care of because it's driving me absolutely bonkers. There we go, that's better. Hey, Dwight, yeah, there's two thoughts on it. One, like, if we're going to continue to go down the path of NIL, which is not going anywhere, right? Players are going to be paid. They're not unspreading that peanut butter. If we're going to continue to go down that path, I don't see any way the NCAA can restrict player movement, right? Because they have to abide by antitrust laws. You can't have rules in place that restrict player movement if that movement could in turn earn them money. Now, the reason, and you guys know this, the reason you can in the NFL restrict player movement is because there's a collective bargaining agreement. There's a players union. It's been collectively bargained on. Both parties agree to it, and they move forward. Well, the NCAA has no jurisdiction over the players anymore now that they can make NIL money because you can't prevent them from profiting. So from a legal standpoint, I think that's just going to be the way of the future. From a sports standpoint, I don't like it because I look down the road 3, 4, 5 years and think, who's going to take advantage of this, right? We all want to be like best case scenario for NIL and transfer and think about the guys who are using it correctly, like Bo Nix, like Michael Penix. But I always look down the road going, now who's going to abuse this? Because you guys know, just like I know, that if players can transfer a second time, somebody's going to go into a lawsuit and say, well, I should be able to transfer a third time or a fourth time. And there's going to be freshmen that leave after 1 year and essentially going to transfer 4 or 5 times looking for the best NIL deal year in and year out. And from a sports standpoint, I hate that. I don't like it. But legally, until there's a players union and the NCAA and whatever the college football universities come together and create some sort of collective bargaining agreement, I think down the road that's what we're going to look at. It is just going to continue to be the Wild West, and guys are going to be able to transfer at will.
In the meantime,
Justin Myers.
In the meantime, Justin, sorry, Chad. In the meantime, would it be possible, do you think, to sign these guys to a contract saying, like you do in the pros, saying they'll stay 2 years or 3 years, maybe you give them an opt-out at some point? You think that's possible?
Yeah, that's going to be the next phase, but it's going to be dependent upon the boosters, right? Because technically right now the schools aren't directly paying the players because I think there brings in a whole bunch of different tax implications. Now they are state employees. There's all sorts of other laws that are implicated. So right now it would depend on the boosters. But Dwight, I'm with you. If I'm a booster right now and I have a player who I've got an NIL deal, there is going to be, much like with coaches, there's going to be a buyout. There is going to be a long-term agreement. There is going to be a penalty to transfer. And again, that will all be decided in court whether or not that is going to be legal, because we haven't seen this in the 150-plus years of college athletics. We've only seen it in the last 3 years. But no, I'm with you. That's the next step. But keep in mind, like Dante Moore, remember, he was heading to Oregon. And he was the number 2 recruited quarterback in the nation. He was committed to Oregon. Well, the moment Bo Nix decided he was coming back for his senior year, yes, because of some NIL deals, Dante Moore all of a sudden was like, all right, well, I'm going to UCLA. And the rumor was that UCLA threw a good chunk of money at him, got him to flip. He played 4 bad games at UCLA, got benched. Now he's transferred. So somebody down in Los Angeles, some UCLA booster, paid Dante Moore probably six figures to be, well, a freshman, but to play about 4 or 5 bad football games. And now he's gone. And you're not going to be able to recoup any of that money. The next step is exactly what you mentioned, Dwight. There's going to be long-term deals. There's going to be contracts. And you know what? Some player, some kid in their family is going to get very bad advice, and they are going to get financially, I think, screwed, for lack of a better term, because of it.
Justin Myers, host of Rip City Mornings here on the Rip City Drive. What do you think about the match between Dylan Gabriel and the Oregon Ducks?
I mean, it's a perfect match, right? I mean, you look at what Bo Nix was able to do coming in from Auburn, and kind of similar type of player. Also, the fact that, you know, Gabriel is going to be able to add kind of a running element. And, you know, you look at the amount of reps that, like, Bo Nix had, that was instrumental in his success at Oregon, right? Not all transfers are created equal. Bo Nix played 2.5 years of college football before he transferred to Oregon. He left as the all-time leading starter in NCAA history. Well, that's going to be broken by Dylan Gabriel, and I think that's going to be a huge thing. Is you can go and pay all this money for high school recruits to come in. You can go and pay all this money and try to lure transfers after their freshman year. But the ability to be able to get a guy who is going to have more than 50 starts in the NCAA, including an entire season of Big 12 football and going up against Texas and these big-time opponents, I think that's going to be huge. That experience, I think, is going to be where the value lies, and I think it's a perfect match for Oregon heading into the Big Ten.
Okay, the Ducks against the Liberty Flames in the Fiesta Bowl. How do you see that one, Justin? How about those tough Flames?
Yeah, I mean, just a barn burner, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, boy, what has happened to bowl games in our life? I mean, we all kind of knew this, guys, didn't we? Like, I've been screaming for years, and, you know, former players would get mad at me, and, you know, certain media members, Aaron Fentress, used to get mad at me because I would come out and I would say what we all knew, that if it wasn't for the national championship, if it wasn't the Rose Bowl, and if it wasn't a marquee opponent, these were exhibitions, these were bake sales. And they really, the wins and losses in bowl games had no implications on the future or standing with the program. And now we're learning that because, guys, Liberty has like 6 opt-outs. Like, Liberty is playing against Oregon in the Fiesta Bowl. This is the biggest game in the history of Liberty, which, by the way, has a very interesting past. Don't Google it. But Liberty football is never going to get an opportunity unless they make the 12-team expanded playoff next year to face off against a top 10 opponent in a marquee New Year's Day bowl game, and even they can keep all their players on the roster. So that being said, Oregon has now announced that not only Bo Nix, but Bucky Irving is going to play. Bo has been recruiting Oregon players. I think it's going to be a bloodbath. I really do. I think this could get ugly real fast.
Are you surprised that the committee left Florida State out?
I'm not surprised. I don't think it was the right decision, but I'm not surprised. I mean, they put in that extra clause that has been, you know, repeated over and over and over again, that is due to certain circumstances where certain players or significant players are injured, that they were going to factor that in. They gave themselves an out clause 5-6 years ago when they put that in there. Now, that being said, I don't think it was right. I understand why people believe that Florida State is not one of the top 4 teams in the country. And you know what? Whoever says that is probably right without Jordan Travis. But, guys, why did we create the 4-team playoff to begin with? It was to prevent this from happening, right? We started with the BCS from the old bowl system so that we could guarantee number 1 would play number 2. And then we had the season where USC was undefeated. We had a season where Auburn was undefeated, and they were the 3rd team. So we're like, okay, just give us 4 teams so that doesn't happen ever again. The 4-team playoff was designed to not let this happen. And ultimately, because it's college football, and I love it so much, but, man, we just cannot stop screwing stuff up. I think it should have always been most deserved, not best. I think it's a fool's errand to try to eyeball test and mathematically determine who is best. Let the undefeated team play on the football field. Let Michigan beat the tar out of Florida State. It's not like we haven't had blowouts in the college football playoff before. The whole 4-team situation was designed to prevent this from happening, and yet they let it happen again.
All right, let's talk about the 4 teams that are there. First of all, your thoughts on Alabama and Michigan.
I think Michigan is the team to beat. I mean, we have been distracted by smoke and mirrors with Jim Harbaugh all season, right? Whether it was Hamburger Gate, they got him a self-imposed 3-game suspension, and then the Connor Stallion Spygate thing that is happening. But if you look back to Michigan the entire season, they have not had a clunker of a game. Like maybe the game against Maryland, but they've been beating everybody significantly, including a win against Penn State, including a win against Ohio State. I know that Alabama just beat Georgia, and that's a significant win. And I know that Alabama bounced back against that win against Texas. But Dwight, I cannot erase the memory of them being down in the Iron Bowl, 4th and 29, with the game on the line and making a miracle play. Now, credit to Bama. They made the play. Auburn had every opportunity to rush 4 in that situation, but I can't erase the fact that Alabama still lost at home to Texas by 10, and they were on the ropes against Auburn in that Iron Bowl. I like Michigan. I like Michigan over everybody because, like I said, we have been distracted by the Jim Harbaugh nonsense, but if you've watched Michigan play, it's boring, but they are a steamroller, and they have been a wagon all season long.
What about Washington, Texas?
I mean, they find like we get another Washington versus Sark, which I don't know if people nationally understand this, but I know this because of my Washington Husky wife and all of my Washington Husky fans that are up in Seattle. Chad, they hate Sark. Sark is a turncoat. Remember, Sark left them for greener pastures at USC, which, of course, turned into a big, giant failure. He had to go into alcohol rehabilitation, turned his life around, turned his career around, and good for Sark. But Washington fans are still very upset with Steve Sarkisian. I like Texas in this game, and it's probably because I'm a bitter Oregon fan and I'm biased. But if that Washington team that showed up in Vegas shows up against Texas, that's going to be a ball game, right? They're going to go toe-to-toe. But if the Washington team that showed up in the Apple Cup against Washington State that needed, again, a miracle 4th down trick play to beat the Cougs, or if the team that had every possible thing go wrong against Arizona State still to kind of walk away with the victory shows up, they're going to get boat raced. But if the Washington team that shows up against Oregon both times shows up in the Sugar Bowl, they could absolutely get a win. But I like Texas in that game.
All right, Justin, I want to ask you, I've had a look at the Oregon State football schedule for next year, and I'm sure you have too. It looks to me like they did a pretty good job of cobbling together a pretty decent schedule. Do you agree?
I do. I mean, it was kind of the options that were there, and I think it's one of those things that works for everybody. I like the fact that the rivalry is continuing with Oregon. I understand why there are some Oregon fans that are a little bit, snippy about why would we give up a home game. And I know there's some Oregon State fans that are very emotional, like, screw them. Why should we ever play them ever again? But when you get right down to it, it's good for both programs. It's good for both fan bases. It's good for the economy of the state of Oregon. I love the fact that they're playing that game. They've got Purdue, they've got Cal, they've got Washington State. So they've got 4 essentially Power 4 schools, and then you're going to be playing against a bunch of Mountain West teams. Now, here's what's going to be interesting, guys, is going forward, the way it's always been is, hey, you go undefeated or 1 loss in a power conference, you get into the 14 playoff. Now, there's going to be a 12-team playoff. Is the committee going to change their opinions as to kind of what is the qualifications? If Oregon State or Washington State makes a run, and while I don't think they're going to beat Oregon next year, Oregon hadn't won at Reser Stadium since 2018. It's been a minute since Oregon's gone to Corvallis and got a win. If the Beavs could go 12-0, could go 11-1, what does the committee think of that schedule? Because it's not a complete Group of 5 schedule, but it's not a complete Power 5 schedule. It's kind of a hybrid one in the middle. Depending on who they get to play quarterback, and if Trent Bray can, stop the mass exodus out of Corvallis, which it sounds like it has for the most part, Oregon State could find themselves 10-11 wins, and they could maybe make a run to the college football playoff with 12 teams. But to your original question, Dwight, yeah, for the circumstances that they had, because it looked like at one point, right, that Oregon State and Washington State were going to play each other like 7 times and then try to cobble together something else. That didn't happen. They managed to kind of still keep the the conference affiliation with the Pac-12, which is massively important financially, because I don't know if you saw that court ruling that came down today. That's a huge deal as well, that they were able to kind of keep themselves in the Pac-12, because it still exists for the next 2 years because of an NCAA clause, and get a schedule on the books before New Year's. I thought that was huge for both Oregon State and Washington State.
All right. In other news, Justin, In-N-Out just opened up right there outside of Boise in Meridian, which is Napa, Idaho. Reports have people waiting 8 hours plus to get their double animal style. I just want to know, is that acceptable behavior, and what's the longest that you have waited for fast food?
Okay, I'll answer the second part first. I think the longest I've ever waited for fast food would probably be 40 minutes. I probably give it about 40 minutes now. Let's talk about the first part. A lot of people, which is way too long. Like I was not happy about it. I was stuck in a drive-through line. I was not happy about it. But let's get back to the first part. I see there's a lot of people taking some cheap shots. Now, I grew up in a tiny little town where there was nothing, and I mean nothing. We had an Abby's Pizza, we had a Taco Time, and we had a Dairy Queen. And that was what we got. And then, boys, in the late 90s, my sophomore year of high school, right down the road, we got a McDonald's. And let me tell you, there were lines around the block when the new McDonald's showed up. Yeah, we could drive into Roseburg another 3 miles and go to the other Mickey D's that had been there for a while, but this was our McDonald's. And so when you live in Meridian, Idaho, and the In-N-Out comes to your town, yeah, you go and you take care of it, because you never know. You never know if you're ever going to be able to get anything coming to your town ever again. So I don't blame them. I know what it's like to be excited. I remember when I was living in Eugene and everybody got pumped up for the new Red Lobster, and like it was I'm not kidding. I am not kidding. Right there across the street in Valley River Center, a Red Lobster went in. And it was a 45-minute wait for a table. Don't even get me started on when Eugene got the P.F. Chang's, boys. Oh, my goodness, that was an hour-long wait. So from somebody that grew up in a small town, Idaho, I get it. I don't blame you. I understand. That being said, yeah, there's no way I'm sitting in my car for anything over 20 minutes for fast food.
All right, Justin, you know this show has always expressed a great interest in the Myers household and
yes.
the things that go on there. So we got the holiday season coming up, and I'm kind of curious if there's any special traditions, like maybe putting on a Santa Claus hat, going down to your birthday suit, and running around the house with a bag of presents over your shoulder. But what special things go on in your household over the holidays?
Well, yeah, there will be no role playing, Dwight. We look. Christmas is sacred, all right? We can have some costume fun during Halloween and the such, and maybe some American flag apparel during the 4th of July. But Christmas is a sacred event, boys. We're not going to mess around with Christmas. That being said, yeah, we are in Portland. My parents live in Salem. My in-laws live in Camas, Washington. It's not quite like the movie Four Christmases. I don't know if you guys have seen Four Christmases, but we're going to have about 3 Christmases. We're going to have our own on Christmas morning, then drive to my parents, then drive to the in-laws. And so basically my Christmas tradition is shuttling around I-5 and the greater areas outside of the city of Portland, seeing everybody for the time being.
You're a beautiful man. Justin Myers, host of Rip City Mornings here on 620 Rip City Radio. Appreciate it, buddy. You're the best, man. We love it when you come on. Thank you.
Hey, listen, I always appreciate you having me on. I appreciate when you call me beautiful as well. You did call me arrogant earlier, which
yes.
I mean, sometimes you might be right, but you know what? You take the good with the bad, boys.
Yeah, I've been called worse. Don't feel bad. There you go, Justin Myers. Yeah, that's true. There's Justin. All right, we'll come back. When we do, we're going to talk a little baseball. The Dodgers, they get Ohtani, and that's just the beginning. You can look for the LA Dodgers to get very aggressive in their approach. Also, we may have some insight from a Bay Area legend on why the Giants did not land Ohtani. And then we'll get back to the NFL coming up at 5 with the Chargers and their decision. Brian Noe going to stop by and talk NFL at 5:20 here on the Rip City Drive with Dwight and Chad.
Chad, I can read that quote from Buster, too. I was telling.
All right, Godfather, the LA Dodgers are finalizing a deal with Tyler Glasnow, formerly of the Rays, for $135 million. He's coming off a career-high 120 innings pitched. He went 10-7, struck out 162, had an ERA of 3.53. So this is one of the better pitchers in baseball. What do you think about Glasnow?
I like him, Chad. He's very effective. The one thing about him is that he can't handle a lot of innings. He gets hurt. He breaks down a little. I know he's kind of been one of those once-a-week guys for Tampa Bay who goes the first 5 or 6 innings of a game, and that's about it. But he's very difficult to hit. He'll be terrific with them, and they're just on a quest right now to sign every good free agent left, I think.
Yeah, and really we know what the weakness of the Dodgers is. It's starting pitching. They need guys who can step in and get the job done there. But I would imagine that this is what we're going to see now from the Dodgers, right? They were a little more frugal last year, and that was in preparation for making a run at Ohtani. They got him, and they got help from him and his agent on deferring a lot of that salary. So don't you expect the Dodgers now over the next 2 or 3 years to be ultra aggressive and continuing to load up the roster?
Yeah, for sure. They don't want to waste Ohtani and Mookie and Freddie and all the talent they have in their lineup. It's imperative they add pitching because their pitching even with that offense, it may not be good enough to get them through the playoffs. We saw with the Braves last year. Historically, maybe the best offense of all time, and they couldn't get past the first round of the playoffs. They couldn't win a series. So you got to have the pitching or you're just cooked in the postseason.
Well, I did hear Dave Roberts today. They indeed are planning on a future of having Ohtani do all things, pitch, be in the lineup and hit. I think he's going to be DH this year, so the plan is to use him as we expected, where once he is able to recuperate from the procedure, we'll see him pitching for the Dodgers in the future.
Yeah, for sure. No reason.
Are you okay with that?
Well, I mean, you have to. The one thing I would say, though, you have a 10-year contract there, and you better be careful because that's a lot of work for one guy. There's a reason nobody's done it since Babe Ruth, basically. It's because it wears on players. And the Babe quit pitching when he got to the Yankees, basically, and that was kind of it for him. It's going to take a lot out of Ohtani. I would guess if he tries to do both, he won't make it to the end of that 10-year contract. It's just really a load on a player's body.
Where do you think he's best? Is he a better hitter or a better pitcher?
I think long-term, he helps you better as a hitter because he can contribute every night. As a pitcher, once a week, maybe 2 times a week, I suppose. But they're going to have to take good care of that arm because he's had 2 arm surgeries on that elbow already. You don't want another one.
Well, Giants fans are freaking out right now because their team has been unable to land, the big-name superstar, Ohtani being the latest. Buster Posey, who is a Bay Area legend, shed some light on why that might be. What did Buster have to say?
Well, Chad, he's also now a member of the ownership group there, just a small ownership group. You know what a hero he is in San Francisco. He's a terrific player.
They love him.
Probably Hall
Legend.
of Famer someday, I think. But his quote about the whole thing with Ohtani was something I think is noteworthy, something that unfortunately keeps coming up from players and even the players' wives, is there's a bit of an uneasiness with the city itself as far as the state of the city with crime, with drugs. Whether that's all completely fair or not, perception is reality. It's a frustrating cycle, I think, and not just with baseball. Baseball is secondary to life and the important things in life. But as far as a free agent pursuit goes, I have seen that it does affect things. And end quote. But I have to say, Chad, this is what I've talked about before, and everybody gives me a bad time when I say it. I know from league sources the Blazers get complaints constantly from visiting teams staying in downtown Portland. They don't believe their players are always safe on the streets because they come back after a game. It's 10 or 11 o'clock, and a lot of them want to go out and have something to eat or maybe a drink or something, and they don't feel comfortable on our streets downtown.
Well, it's an issue, especially for a lot of these baseball players because, or at least when I was there, you've got these guys playing. Most of them are married and have families, and the wives are, bringing the kids to the ballpark and back and forth between home and the park and stuff like that. And so if they've got to navigate the city sometimes by themselves, the players don't want their wives and their kids to be in a position where they feel unsafe.
Yep.
That's the reality of it.
Yep, it's absolutely true. And there was some thoughts that when Ohtani came to town, he saw some of that stuff and was a little uneasy about it. And frankly, it's more important with baseball players because they go to a town. They stay there 3 or 4, sometimes even 5 days in the same town. So they're walking around in the daytime. They're hanging out after games. They have their favorite spots. They go for dinner and stuff. But people have to understand that nobody wants to feel unsafe, no matter if you're a big-time, big, giant, 6'5", 220-pound guy, you still want to feel safe where you are.
All right. Well, I'll tell you what, man. Sometimes navigating Delta Park to get over to the golf course can be a little, it can be an exciting situation sometimes.
Is that right?
It can be, especially in the early morning hours with some of the people bumping around. All right, we'll come back and we're going to talk about the Chargers. What is the right decision for them now that they finally got rid of Brandon Staley? What's the best coach that can come in to get Justin Herbert on the track that he needs to be on to compete for a championship? We'll talk about that next, and then Brian Noe going to stop by and talk NFL at 5:20. Well, good news for you, Godfather. Next year, when you tune in to watch Justin Herbert, you might do so with a clear mind without the frustration knowing that Brandon Staley's in charge, man. He was let go last night after that debacle in Las Vegas where they got pounded 63-21. And you asked me a good question. Why didn't they make this move a long time ago, right? Like after the playoff collapse to Jacksonville last year. You know, it's just a shame that some organizations handle business a little bit differently, and the Chargers with the Spanos family have long been known as a franchise that doesn't want to pay coaches who are not coaching for them, and they paid the price. They had the chance to hire a guy like Sean Payton. They elected to bring Staley back, and look at what you have, a lost season that ends in frustration, and now searching for a new GM and new coach, and Justin Herbert, you know, a guy who's just been unlucky when it comes to the coaches who have led him over the last several years, both at Oregon and in LA with the Chargers. But I mean, after last night, it probably had to be done before the end of the year, right? When you lose like that.
Oh yeah, I think so. It was just crying for it. But the interesting thing is, you know, they're not an organization that fires coaches in the middle of the year, are they? I'm trying to remember the last coach they fired in the middle of the season.
It was Kevin Gilbride back at the end of the 90s.
Yeah.
The old offensive coordinator from the Houston Oilers.
Yeah, he was a run-and-shoot guy, actually. Yeah, I remember Kevin.
Yep. That was the last time, and now they've made the move again, and you know they can start the search for a GM and a coach. I mean, what's your preference in regards to that process? Do you want the GM first and then have him be a part of the process and lead the search for the new coach, or do you go out and get the big name coach first and then have him pick the GM he wants to work with? What's the best way to do that?
Well, I think if you get the big name, if you get a guy like Jim Harbaugh, who would be a great choice for them, if you get him, you sign him first, and then he tells you who the GM's going to be, because he's there and he's going to be making a lot of personnel decisions himself, and you want to make sure he gets along with whoever the GM is. That's so important in all sports right now. There has to be a synergy between the GM and the head coach. If there isn't, you're going to have problems inevitably.
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously going to be a lot of possibilities out there. The hot assistant right now is the offensive coordinator in Detroit, Ben Johnson, who everyone across the league speaks highly of and has been very impressed with his offense. The future of Bill Belichick is uncertain at this point, although the reports indicate it sure looks like he's going to be gone, and the Kraft family will part ways with the hoodie at the end of the year, which would make him available. And then you've always got the yearly flirtation that exists between Jim Harbaugh and the NFL. I mean, who do you want them to go after? What type of coach are you looking for?
Well, first and foremost, Chad, I want somebody who's been a head coach, experienced, knows how to come in and get everything organized and run like a real NFL organization. And I was so impressed with what Sean Payton did in Denver. That's what he did. He came in and said, okay, here's the rules. We're not going to be messing around in the practice facility. There's going to be players here. Nobody's going to have their personal coach or trainer in here. And here's how we're going to do this and that. We're going to handle the media this way. Here's what the rules are. This is how an NFL team works. And bring in smart coordinators and just get everything done the right way. And I think only somebody with head coaching experience in the past can really know how to do that. I'm so suspicious of assistant coaches, and yeah, sometimes they do work. They work great. Other times they do not. And I just think they're at a crossroads there. They can't afford to waste Justin Herbert's prime years anymore with a team that just isn't ready. And this team, unfortunately, their best players, and Alex Brink referred to this a little bit, their best players are a little bit long in the tooth, and they're going to need a makeover along with the new coach. So it's going to take some pretty smart people in the player personnel side and the coaching side.
All right, just to give you an idea of some of the names that are out there for the openings, which we're going to see come across the league, and there could be anywhere from 8, 9, 10 potential openings in the NFL this year. There's going to be a lot of guys who are moved out. This is a list put together by CBS. They put together their list of the top 7 candidates for the Chargers job. Number 7 on the list is Matt Campbell, who is the head coach at Iowa State. And they say here that Campbell has changed the culture at Iowa State in his 8 years with the Cyclones, running an NFL-style program and building it from the ground up. He's coached Brock Purdy and Breece Hall, paving the way for those two to have NFL success. Number 6 on the list, Lincoln Riley, head coach at USC. I mean, the connection there is pretty obvious, right? He's already in L.A., the Chargers are there, and he's known as a quarterback whisperer who has a great offensive mind. I don't know how much luster is off of Riley at this point after this past season at SEC, but he obviously knows offense. Number 5 on the list, Godfather, is Mike McDonald, who is the Ravens defensive coordinator. Staley's 3 years as Chargers head coach may have the franchise shy away from a head coach with a defensive background, but McDonald is the top defensive coordinator available. McDonald was with the Ravens under Wink Martindale from 2014 through 2020 before serving as Michigan's defensive coordinator in 2021. Bobby Slowick, who I know because he had time with the Broncos staff, he's the Texans offensive coordinator. And obviously we see the development with C.J. Stroud this year in the offense that he's been able to put together. Stroud has been terrific. And he's on pace to break Andrew Luck's rookie record of 4,374 yards. Ben Johnson, the Lions offensive coordinator, only 37 years old, top offensive name that's being floated out there right now. He's got a background as a wide receivers coach with the Dolphins, and he elevated his stock as the offensive coordinator in Detroit. The Lions are 6th in points per possession, 4th in yards per possession, and under Johnson, they have a top 5 rushing offense in rushing yards per game and yards per carry, and the Lions were 4th in points per possession and 3rd in yards per possession last season. So he's been very productive. Eric Bieniemy, who is currently with the Commanders as an offensive coordinator, he's number 2 on the list. Obviously, his work with Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes. And number 1 on the list is Bill Belichick.
Yeah.
So that's what CBS Sports has put together.
Yeah. See, Belichick would interest me some. I wouldn't bring him in unless he agreed to bring in a good quality offensive coordinator because he's a defensive guy, always has been. But he's really good with that, and their defense would shape up almost immediately, I'm sure. He would interest me. Lincoln Riley interests me a lot. And I just flat out, and I think you agree, I flat out would not take a guy with a defensive background. It's just no thanks. I just can't
unless
do that.
It's Belichick.
Right. Because he's, his record's, it's unmatched, really. I mean, he's one of the great coaches in history, and it would be interesting to give him that opportunity. He would be probably my number 1 choice after Harbaugh. Harbaugh's a guy that I would there's no mistaking Harbaugh's success rate. He succeeds everywhere, and he'd be the guy. I think we both know, though, that they can't afford him or they won't afford him, more likely. They just won't pay the money.
That would be my guess based on the price tag that Harbaugh would likely want. Now, I would bring in Belichick if and you know who his offensive coordinator would be. I mean, it's going to be Josh McDaniels. That'd be my guess. Yeah. Because I know that Belichick's got a brand. He knows how to build culture, and he could lay a foundation for a franchise that desperately needs it. The one thing that would scare me away with Belichick at this stage in his career is personnel decisions, because you know he's going to want power and control, but he's proven that when it comes to the draft and being able to identify players that can help the roster, I think that would be a concern. But,
for sure.
I mean, if Belichick, the most successful head coach of all time, has interest in your job, you simply have to look into it. It's not like he's going to come on a cheap price tag either. He's Bill freaking Belichick.
That's right.
There's one other defensive coordinator that I would definitely talk to and consider. Dan Quinn, who's the defensive coordinator right now in Dallas.
Yeah.
You know, he built a culture and had a tough-minded team in Atlanta, took him to a Super Bowl. He was able to hire Kyle Shanahan and let him take over the offense, and they did great work together. I think Dan Quinn is a guy who knows how to build culture and lay a foundation. So if they went defensive, I would be okay with Belichick or Dan Quinn. But outside of that, I want an offensive-type guy. My number 1 choice for any job, no matter what team it is Jim Harbaugh. The reason why is because of the track record of success, Godfather. No matter where he's gone, he brings his style of football. His football teams are tough. You know what you're going to get. He's had success everywhere he's been, and I just believe in him so much as a coach that if you bring him in and give him a chance to work with a guy like Justin Herbert, they would have tremendous success. The downside to Harbaugh, aside from the pretty penny that you have to pay him, is that you just have to be willing to stay out of his way, because he's an abrasive human being, but very successful.
Shelf life with him may not be as long as it would be on some of these other guys, maybe. He wears out
Mr.
his welcome.
Spanos. Yeah, if you're the owner and want to have regular conversations with Jim, he may or may not be open to that, you know?
Yeah. I really like, you know, what you said. Dan Quinn, I hadn't even thought of him, Chad. That might be a really good choice because his ego would not get in the way of hiring a quality offensive coordinator. Some of these guys don't want to share the spotlight with somebody who might take their job. But Dan Quinn has already proven he'll hire the best guy if he can. And I like his confidence level when it comes to, you know, I covered a couple games that Atlanta played when he was down there. Very confident guy. I think his confidence radiates among his players. They draw confidence from him. I think he might be a pretty darn good choice for that job.
Yeah, Quinn is he was one of those guys that I thought Denver may go after last year when they got rid of Hackett, because he had a connection to Seattle and knew Russ, and I was definitely open to that because of, you know, the success that he's had. So, but the reality is, if you look across the NFL, the best teams, even the teams that are in the hunt, they're all offensive coaches, Godfather.
Yeah.
Offensive coaches, and the ones, you know, really the defensive coach with the most success is John Harbaugh, but he's done a great job of assembling a staff, and they've built their offense around, you know, Lamar Jackson. They've done a heck of a job. But elsewhere, all the top teams right now, whether it's Kyle Shanahan or it's Mike McCarthy, or you know, just go down the line, Andy Reid, like all these teams are all offensive head coaches. Sean Payton and the work he's done with the Broncos this year, offensive head coach. So I'm with you there. I think the defensive coach, that style of football, that's just not where the NFL's at right now. So I would think long and hard, and I would guess the Chargers would too after their experience with Brandon Staley.
Yeah, you know, Chad, it's funny. I don't get it how they're so willing to pay a quarterback $25 million or, you know, $30 million a year. But
or nowadays, $50 million a year.
I know. I wasn't even going to go there. But then not want to pay a head coach who has had, you know, guaranteed success almost. You can't pay him $15 million a year? $15 million a year? Come on now. That doesn't make any sense to me. The good teams have good coaches. Pretty much, I think that's pretty much true all the time.
Herbert's average per year is $52.5 million.
Yeah, couldn't we just pay his coach 15? Come on. Crazy.
Well, yeah, I agree. Like the Broncos didn't even bat an eye. Sean Payton, that's the guy. Okay, we'll take him. And boom, look at the results.
What's he making, Chad?
I want to say it's. Let me double check. I think it's like $9 million a year. But
God, what a bargain!
Let's see here. I could be wrong on that. Let me double check here. Oh no, I was. Yeah, Sean Payton's the second highest paid coach. And he's making somewhere between 17 and $20 million a year.
Yeah, well, he's earning it. Huh. Nobody's questioning it now, I'll tell you that.
$9 million. I was half right. Gosh, $18 million per season.
You'd take it for less.
No wonder he took the job. You want to pay me $18 million a year? Yeah, I can do that.
Yeah.
That's big money. All right, we got to talk to Brian Noe. Bruno! Brian Noe, Fox Sports Radio, going to join us next. We're going to take in a lot of these games. Cowboys and Bills. That's a big one up in Buffalo. Broncos and Lions tomorrow. We're going to take on the Chargers. Brian Noe's up next on the Rip City Drive. Brian, the Godfather asked me a very good question before the show today. Who is likely to get married first, you or Travis Kelce?
Is that you talking me or Travis Kelce?
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh wow. I don't know. It's
That's evasive there. That's an evasion.
I don't know how far along he and T Swift are there. You know, they move very fast, these star-studded couples.
Well, you know how fast you're moving along. I mean, come on.
Well, you know, it's like, are you going to win this marathon against this unknown runner? I don't know if he's like from Kenya. I don't know if he's like got a beer belly from, you know, like from Europe or something like. I don't know. I don't know what I'm up against here exactly.
Well, very interesting. Well, Brian, the Chargers finally got rid of Brandon Staley. You know, based on what you know about the Spanos family, who do you think they're going to target for their next head coach?
Well, Belichick makes a lot of sense. If Belichick is going elsewhere, it'd be a pretty interesting spot for him to land. I don't know if that actually comes about or not, but I just laugh when I hear some of these other rumors of, hey, how about Belichick in Carolina? It's like, dude, he's in the twilight of his coaching career. He's not taking over a one or maybe 2-win team when it's all said and done. He's not going to Carolina. I don't see that at all. But to link up with Justin Herbert and to have a talented roster like that, and he can spruce up and soup up that defense, I think that has real potential there.
All right, I want to ask you about this. Kadarius Toney's penalty. Yeah, the video shows clearly he was offside. But there's a lot of people talking about it, Brian. You know, in fact, there's clips of him being offside the whole game in those situations. What did you think of that whole thing?
Yeah, it's look, I think this, Dwight, is if they don't have one of the most spectacular plays that gets called back, I think a lot of the conspiracy theories are, you know, tame at this point. Let's say Mahomes drops back and it's an incomplete pass. You know what I mean? And,
well, sure.
and Tony's offside. It's no big deal. It happened to be where there's a pinpoint throw to Kelce, and then he has a pinpoint throw to Tony, who doesn't bobble it, he catches it, doesn't fumble it, nothing.
Right.
And so it seems like, what's going on here exactly? That sort of thing. I just think, bro, you got to learn how to line up onside. And this is on Tony. This is not the officials. This isn't like, you know, Mahomes throwing a whiny hissy fit at the end of the game and fans are just taking that and running with it. It's, bro, this is as basic as it gets. Line up right. And you probably win that game and haven't lost 4 of 6, but the Chiefs are just completely frustrated right now, and it's just one thing after another with the drops now not lining up correctly, and they're just falling lower and lower in the AFC standings. We're not used to seeing that.
I wonder, too, with the NFL now, with the prevalence and legalization of gambling and so many people now wagering money on NFL games, if we're going to see more issues like this pop up in the future where people get really frustrated when there's a call that determines the outcome of the game.
Well, you know this from Gambling Chad days. Just settle in, because there's going to be a long road of frustration ahead of you. I don't care what kind of gambler you are. Yes, if you gamble enough, even if you're successful at gambling, you will be frustrated many, many, many times along the way. And that's just one of the many chapters in the long book of gambling, my friend.
Okay, Brian, I'm hearing all this Cowboy talk now. Dak Prescott is the MVP favorite. Cowboys all of a sudden look great. They're going to Buffalo this week. What do you think?
Yeah, listen, Dak Prescott has played fantastic football. As of late, the last 8 weeks, he's thrown over 20 touchdown passes, only 2 interceptions. He absolutely belongs smack dab in the MVP discussion. I think that this is one of those games that, look, man, any given Sunday, maybe the Bills play good football again. Josh Allen's even better at home typically than he is on the road. So the Bills are capable, but I think this is too much of a knee-jerk reaction of The Bills finally wake up. They're a 6-6 middling team. Then they win a game last week against the Chiefs. They get bailed out by a call because a wide receiver can't line up correctly. And now all of a sudden, they're favored to win. I'll happily take the points and ride with Dallas in this one.
We're talking with Brian Noe, Fox Sports Radio here on the Rip City Drive. What happened to the Dolphins on Monday night against the Titans? And in addition to that, brother, are they in danger of losing the AFC East now with Buffalo starting to get things right?
I mean, the first things first, that was a total choke job, meltdown. That's a choke job and meltdown melded together.
That. Choke down.
It's a choke down. So what happened? That's how bad it was. It was so bad it needs a new term. That, Chad, when they went up by 2 touchdowns late, the only thing I was thinking was, wow, Miami might actually cover the spread because they were not looking good at all as far as that went. And then the Titans scored. I'll be honest with you. I was paying closer attention to the other game going on because that Giants-Packers game, that was a close game. And I look up, okay, Will Levis, they're driving. They score. Okay, they get the 2-point conversion. I'm like, they're only down by 6. If the Dolphins don't get a first down, this is a game. And it just absolutely slipped away. That was a brutal loss. And you look at Miami, I mean, the Bills have a shot. They still have a head-to-head game with the Dolphins left. So, the Bills have a shot to overtake them, but I think that is also a knee-jerk where Buffalo's been this 500 team throughout most of the season, and they've got Dallas this week. They close at Miami. My money is still on the Dolphins to win the division.
I wanted to ask you about it. I'm sure you saw Cam Newton's comments this week about game managers and how certain quarterbacks were game managers. And there seems to be some stigma attached to that now. But what did you think of his comments, and what do you think about the characterization of game managers?
Yeah, it's almost like, Dwight, you ever hear the term, like, she's got a nice personality?
Yeah,
you hear that phrase, right?
Yes, I've met several of them.
Yeah.
Yes, uh-huh.
It really means she's pretty ugly, right? Like, that's what it typically means.
Right.
But it would be the same thing as, well, she has a nice personality. She has a nice personality. That's not a bad thing at all. Having a nice personality is great.
Yeah.
But what they're really saying is, they're lacking in other areas. That's what Cam is really saying. Yeah. I don't think there's anything wrong with a game manager. There are plenty of games where that's exactly what you want. You've got the upper hand, manage the game, don't put the ball in harm's way, protect it, and we get out of here with the W. So I don't think that's a bad thing at all. It's turned into a diss, and the way Cam is saying that, he absolutely means that as a negative. We got to pick a new word or a new phrase for it to be a negative, because game manager is not it, but he absolutely meant it in a negative way. He's just saying their top-end talent leaves something to be desired. Those guys don't have the top-end talent of like a Mahomes or someone like that. That's what he's saying, but I just don't like the wording of it.
Well, Brian, this is now fascinating to me. So if Brock Purdy is the quarterback with the great personality, who is the hot quarterback that's crazy?
That's right. Lamar Jackson. That's what Lamar Jackson is, the crazy hot girl that you're like, man, this is fun. This is amazing. Like, and then it's like, this is unstable. This is not what we want for a future going forward here. It is Lamar Jackson. He is the hot stripper of the NFL.
Oh, that's so good. All right, elsewhere, I guess, well, this really goes back to you and I. Should we be concerned by the Eagles slump and what that could mean for the Niners and Brock Purdy?
I think that this reminds me of college football a little bit, where you guys see it in the Pac-12. Like, the Pac-12 was really, really good this season. And there are some teams that will just play a gauntlet. They'll play 4 tough games in a row, and they're just dog-tired. You can tell it really takes its toll on them. Or, say, like the SEC, where you play 4 pretty tough games in a row sometimes, and it takes a toll. That's what I saw from the Eagles. The Eagles just look like a team where the road has caught up with them. And I still think they're a very talented team. They need to crank up their pass rush. to help out their secondary. Their pass defense isn't that good, but that's a top-of-the-line offensive line especially. And then when they're not fumbling the ball, turnovers from Jalen Hurts and A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith, all their top playmakers fumbled against Dallas. So we're down on them, but if you really take a step back, the Niners had that game circled since last season when it all fell apart in the NFC title game. So they get worked in that one, and then they fumble the ball, and they have this sloppy performance on the road against Dallas, and they were geared up because they hadn't beaten anybody good. I still think that Philly is really, really talented, and they're going to be an incredibly tough outcome playoff time. They just hit a rough patch. A lot of Super Bowl winning teams hit that rough patch, and they hit theirs.
And you're right about that stretch. 5 games where they played Dallas twice, the Bills, the Chiefs, the 49ers. That's a brutal stretch.
It's really tough, man, and you could see that. You could see in that Niners game, they started off great against San Francisco, and they ran out of gas. Like completely. The tank was empty. So I think against the Seahawks, I think you're going to see a focused team. I think they're going to run it really well against Seattle, and I would expect them to get back on track.
All right, Brian, what do you think about the Broncos? Chad's Broncos are going to Detroit, and, the Lions are only favored by 4.5. Who do you like?
I like the Lions in that one, Dwight. It's one of these situations where I think the spot matters instead of streaks. Because if you look at the Broncos, they've won 6 of 7. They've played some really good football. The Lions have lost 2 of 3, and they've looked bad in those 2 losses. Thanksgiving against the Packers, they were bad. Last week against the Bears, they were bad. But that's the 3rd straight road game for Denver. And I look at Detroit, and as long as they're protecting the football, I expect a very focused group that is a good team that needs to get back on track. Saturday, prime time, I think they cover against Denver. I think Detroit gets back on track on Saturday here.
All right, what about Cleveland -3 against the Chicago Bears with Joe Flacco? The Browns defense a little bit leaky over the last few weeks. Flacco does, have the ability to get the ball out and downfield. What's your take on that one?
I like the under in that one, Chad, is my first thought there. I think the Bears have quietly played really good defense. And I still think the Browns, you're right, they were leaky, but they forced a lot of takeaways. They intercepted Trevor Lawrence 3 times last week. So I still respect the Browns' defense, and the Bears are not some high-flying unit, So I think points are going to be more so at a premium. But I also think that Flacco, it's a weird team, right? Because Flacco's throwing an interception each game, but overall he's played pretty well. So, that's a sneaky spot. Like, that's a game where the hook might come back to bite you. But I like the under more than anything in that one.
I want to ask you something, Brian. You mentioned Belichick with the Chargers, and I agree with you on that. I think if he's interested, you got to talk to him about it. But the question really is, will the Chargers spend the kind of money they would need to get Belichick there, or to get Harbaugh there, who would be a great choice for them, I think?
Man, they should, and if they don't, I don't know what they're doing. I don't know what they're in the business of. And if there's ever a reason to splurge, it's off of the heels of the Brandon Staley era. You know what I mean? If there's ever a time to okay, let's open up the checkbook here. For Belichick, it's right after you got done with 63-21 against the Raiders, and everything that's happened with that leaky defense. I would absolutely do it. With Belichick, it's just, it's not your long-term 10, 20-year coach of the future type deal, but you want to maximize the window of Justin Herbert. You talk about opening up the wallet. That's what they just did for Herbert. He was the highest-paid guy for a little while and is still one of the highest-paid guys, so you've got to get a top-of-the-line coach to match with him. And Belichick would be one of those guys. Harbaugh had a lot of success in the NFL also. So, yeah, I just don't think you can skimp when it comes to something like that.
Dude, how great was Tommy DeVito's agent on Monday Night Football?
Man, you talk about leaning in. That dude was completely leaning into the whole thing. It was awesome. It was so fun. And good for Tommy Cutlets, man. 3 wins in a row.
Amazing.
It's an awesome story. And that was a great drive at the end. Think of that, Chad, where Saquon Barkley gets tripped up by the turf monster, fumbles without getting hit. The next thing you know, the Packers take the lead. We don't have that much time left. And it was just a poised drive. Nice throw for a big gain by Tommy DeVito.
Corner out.
And they win the game. Like, that was a great story.
All right, Brian, the Ducks are minus 17.5 against Liberty in the Fiesta Bowl. Who do you like?
Man, Dwight, it's you talk about what could have been and what is. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, you go from if you can beat Penix Jr. and get some revenge on the Huskies, you are in the college football playoff. We'd be talking about Oregon taking on, I don't know, one of the heaviest hitters, like either Alabama or Texas, however the seeding would have worked out. And instead we're talking about Liberty. Liberty, 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 Liberty. Like, that is ridiculous what's happening over here. I'm sickened by this, but I think if they show up and want to play, they could name their score against Liberty, but I don't know if they're going to be focused. I couldn't take the points with Liberty to answer your question, but I just don't know how geeked they're going to be to play that one. We've seen this before. How many times is the team on the cusp of the playoff? They don't make it. They go to their bowl game, and they are sleepwalking. And taking the points might be the better way to go, but I just can't do it with an offense as talented as Oregon's.
Hey, brother, I'm going to be down at the Sun Bowl watching your Irish play. You going to go down?
Where's that at? Like El Paso? Is that it?
Yes. Yeah. Don't act like that's beyond a destination that you would drive to. Come on, man.
Man, you know, now that I think about this, when is it? What date? Is it the 28th?
December 29th.
29th.
Yes.
I don't know if the timing would work out, but you know what? I'm going to look at that because that would be awesome to get a little ball in person, watch the Irish and the Beavs. I'm not opposed to something like that, Chad, doing.
Dude, the Irish fan base sold out that stadium in less than 24 hours. It's amazing.
Isn't that crazy?
Chad,
crazy.
Tell them your ticket story, Chad.
Oh, yeah. So I committed with my boy Steve to go to the game long before we knew who was going to be in the game, right? Uh-huh. So I got tickets for $60 a piece on the 50-yard line, about 25 rows up. So perfect location. Well, once I saw what Notre Dame fans did, and now the tickets are gone, and the secondary market, I was like, we could get press passes and then put these bad boys back on the market. And he goes, that's interesting. So once I get confirmation on the passes, then I'm going to hope that there's a Irish-loving fan out there that would like some premium seats for a good price.
Man, there you go. I like the hustle right there. I do
Baller
like
status.
That's right. Not opposed to that whatsoever. What's the over-under on what you would get if you put them on the market?
I paid $60 a piece. Right now, it looks like I could get somewhere for that location, somewhere between $300 and $400 per.
Okay, not bad.
No, that's kind of what I thought.
And then what you do, you take that cash and you lay the points with the Irish and try to double it.
Oh, man, that is a Bino statement right there. That is Brian Noe.
Yeah, worst case scenario.
House money.
Yeah.
House money.
No harm, no foul. We still saw the game anyway.
You can't lose.
Oh, dude. Well, hey, Brian, appreciate you coming on, buddy. You're the best. Merry Christmas from Dwight and I, and enjoy the games, man. This is the best time of the year right now.
Oh, it's a ball smorgasbord. Happy holidays to you guys, too. Merry Christmas, and always great being on with you guys.
You got it. Brian Noe, Fox Sports Radio here on the Rip City Drive. I don't know. I think I might put money on. I don't know who's going to get married first, Godfather Noe or Kelsey. I'm not sure. That's a tough one.
I think it's Brian Noe. I do.
He has been hanging out with the same honey for quite some time now.
Well, and he kind of sounded as if we're at least a possibility on that.
Yeah, he didn't shut it down.
No. He had the opportunity to say, nah, that's not going to happen.
No, I don't need that. Whatever. He didn't do that. All right, we'll come back. We'll hand out some high fives. Rip City Drive with Dwight and Chad.
on, man. It's high five. You know me. I'm a favorite. It's got to be some sort of mistake. I mean, look at me. I'm an attractive hand giving a high five.
High five. It's time for Dwight and Chad to hand out their high fives.
All right, Godfather, you want to kick this one off? Who's going to get your high five today?
Yeah, easy one for me today, Chad. I'm going to go with the state of Washington Supreme Court. They made so many of my Oregon State and Washington State fan friends happy today.
Well, I will give mine to Oregon State and Washington State for standing strong together and getting a big win. They deserve a high five for that.
Yes, sir.
And that really is a big deal for Oregon State and Washington State. It doesn't matter to the rest of the schools that are on their way to different conferences, but for Oregon State and Washington State to have control of the conference now and access to funding that's going to help them stay in business for the next couple of years as they kind of formulate their plan on what's next. That's massive. I mean, that's all we've talked about in regards to those two schools is, getting control, getting a win from the courts, and then being able to have some funding to function over the next couple of years. Big time.
Victory for the little guy, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, that doesn't happen very often in today's world, does it?
Especially in court. Yeah.
Especially in college football.
Yeah.
That's good. That's a good win. All right. How much longer do we have to wait? We only have only a few hours, and we'll be sitting back and chilling in the ultimate place, El Gaucho, Godfather. That's not a bad thing.
Our romantic late-night dinner together at El Gaucho.
Yes! That is a win, a big-time win. Burkhart, you got any high fives you want to hand out, bro?
Yeah, I'm just going to give my high fives to, I think I'll give it to Oregon State and Washington as well. I think it's a big thing for them to be able to get into those funds and stay afloat because that's what they need right now.
There you go. Big deal.
Chad, wouldn't you agree those other 10 schools really don't need that money? They're going to be just fine, right?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Now, as we know in business, people don't get rich by just letting other people have a bunch of money. But, it's one of those things where it's like it almost appeared as cruel that those other 10 schools were fighting tooth and nail to have access to those funds, right?
Yeah.
That they didn't want Oregon State and Washington State to have control. It's kind of goofy, especially with it's not just that those schools are just going to bigger conferences with more money, but Oregon State and Washington State, I mean, wouldn't you say that those are the two most financially challenged schools in the conference?
I would say
probably.
That. Yeah, I would say that. They don't have the big endowments, for instance, that Cal and Stanford probably have. There's no question.
Well, I still think my hope would be that they can perform the reverse merger, keep the Pac-12 name, and then, as they continue this process, be able to go out and, handpick teams from the Mountain West and other teams across the country. Of course, the ACC could disband potentially, so they could have access to some really good schools. And then once they get their conference reformed, then you go out to market and see what you can get in terms of a TV deal. And it may not be what the Big Ten and the SEC are getting. It may not be what the Big 12 is getting, but if they could get something in the neighborhood of $20 to $30 million per school, that'd be huge. It's a possibility. It gives them a chance.
Yeah, you start thinking ahead. If the ACC kind of breaks up, and then you look at the Big 12 without Oklahoma, Texas, there's going to be some TV time available out there. There's going to be networks that would probably, just the ACC going away would create some opportunity for them. And I think they got a shot at making some money out of it in the long haul if they can hang on for a couple of years.
Well, whether it's a streaming platform or one of the networks, one thing we know is that all of these places are looking for live sporting content to put on, their channels, because people desire it. They want football, they want live sporting events, and so there's a demand for it. So I think that puts them in a position where they can get something done. We'll just have to wait and see how lucrative it can become based on the conference they put together. But at least these funds that they're going to have access to will give them ability to stabilize until, they reform, with the reverse merger, or they join a different conference or whatever, everything's changed so quickly, Godfather.
Yeah.
The way things are right now, it could change, it could be totally different when we hit the summertime too. Maybe there'll be a conference that will extend an invite to the two schools.
Yeah, I think that's possible, or at least maybe pick up a couple of games that they're playing. And I don't know. I look ahead, and there's all kinds of possibilities out there, things that could change. I know the NBA at one time thought, wow, they're going to have a bonanza in that next television deal. And it's kind of looking more and more like they may not. So these things do change. But look, live sports is still the only thing you can put on television, really, that's DVR proof. You don't want people recording whatever there is that they're watching because then they fast forward through the commercials.
You're right. Yep. Yeah, it's DVR proof, no question. Well, that's going to do it for us. Big thanks to our guests today, Alex Brink, Justin Myers, and Brian Noe.
Wow.
Big thanks to Chris Burkhart for doing everything today, running around and handling all the moving parts. And tomorrow, don't forget the Blazers back-to-back home games. Both tip times are at 6 against the Mavericks and Warriors. Game day starting Saturday and Sunday at 3:30 here on your home of the Blazers, 620 Rip City Radio. Hey, Dwight, enjoy your afternoon. I'll see you in a few hours for our candlelight dinner.
Don't forget your credit card, pal.
Have a good night, my friends.
All right, see you.